On April 30th, 1945, the world breathed a collective sigh of relief. Hitler was dead, or so we were told. According to the official story, he shot himself in a bunker beneath Berlin, and Soviet troops burned his body in the rubble of a collapsing empire. That moment was meant to mark the end of the most terrifying chapter in modern history. Case closed. Evil defeated. But what if it wasn't? In 2023, a team of researchers trained a powerful AI on over 70,000 pages of declassified documents, FBI files, Soviet NKVD archives, British intelligence reports, escaped testimonies, banking transactions, even witness statements hidden for decades. The machine had no agenda, no bias. It just looked for patterns. And when it was done, the results stunned even the most hardened skeptics. The AI calculated a 70% probability that Hitler did not die in Berlin. Even more disturbingly, it suggested a 30% chance that he went on to command a global underground network, the Fourth Reich, from the shadows. It sounds impossible. It sounds insane. But what if the official story was the real conspiracy? Why were Hitler's remains never definitively identified? Why did Stalin insist for years that Hitler escaped? Why did American intelligence receive hundreds of credible reports placing him in South America? And most chilling of all, why are thousands of files about Hitler's fate still classified to this day? This is not fiction. This is the story buried in real documents, secret operations, and a trail of money, science, and silence that stretches across continents. What if the man the world believed dead was still alive, building a new empire in the shadows? Let's follow the clues, and let the AI show us a version of history we were never meant to see. The story we've been told is neat and cinematic. Hitler, cornered in his bunker, swallowed a cyanide capsule, shot himself in the head, and his loyal followers burned his corpse in the Chancellery courtyard, all while Soviet artillery rained down overhead. But look closer, and the cracks start to show. The witnesses, all of them were either devout Nazis or people under direct Soviet control. Their testimonies are riddled with contradictions. Hitler's valet said the Führer slumped after the shot. His bodyguard insisted he was already dead before it happened. The secretary said the bodies were reduced to ash, but the cooks swore large chunks of their bodies remained, and none of it was ever independently verified. When Soviet troops entered the bunker, they didn't find a body. They found ... ashes, bones, scorched fragments. Nothing that could definitively prove who had died there, or if anyone had died at all. Even more baffling was Stalin's behavior. Instead of celebrating the death of his greatest enemy, he immediately began sowing doubt. At the Potsdam Conference, Stalin told US President Truman, flat out, "We did not find Hitler's body. Maybe he escaped." Why would Stalin lie? Or, more disturbingly, why would he tell the truth? His comments weren't isolated. Soviet media repeatedly published headlines speculating that Hitler had escaped. Soviet agents searched Europe and South America for years. Were they simply misled? Or were they following leads the West ignored? Then there's the skull. For decades, Soviet authorities refused to show Hitler's remains. Then, in the 2000s, Russia finally revealed a skull fragment with a bullet hole, calling it the final, irrefutable proof. But American geneticists tested the bone. It wasn't Hitler's. It belonged to a woman under 40. If that was Eva Braun... then where was Adolf Hitler? And why, in nearly 80 years, has no one, not one government, agency, or archaeologist, ever produced a single fragment of Hitler's confirmed remains? For a man whose death was supposedly one of the most documented moments in history, there's an eerie lack of real evidence. No autopsy, no forensic analysis, just hearsay, just testimony from loyal Nazis and secretive Soviets. This is precisely what the AI flagged. It recognized the inconsistencies, the contradictions, and the gaping holes in the timeline. It saw a pattern not of truth but of deliberate confusion, of strategic ambiguity, of historical smokescreens. And when you piece it all together, no body, no forensic proof, inconsistent testimonies. Political games, the clean, heroic ending we were taught starts to fall apart. The AI didn't uncover a smoking gun. It uncovered something more dangerous: the absence of certainty. Because sometimes, the scariest truth is that we don't know what happened at all. If Hitler escaped, where did he go? That's where the AI's analysis of declassified FBI files becomes chilling. Between 1945 and 1960, American intelligence received over 300 reports of sightings of a man resembling Hitler across South America. Most were dismissed, chalked up to hysteria or hoaxes. But not all of them. Some reports were marked source reliable. One of the most compelling came from Agent Robert Carter on August 15, 1954. His report described a mysterious German-speaking man living in an isolated estate near San Carlos de Bariloche, Argentina. The locals called him Donna Dappo. They wouldn't speak his name above a whisper. He was pale, reserved, with a pronounced Austrian accent and a noticeable limp. He always kept his left hand covered, a strange detail. Aligning with Hitler's hand injuries from the failed 1944 assassination attempt, Carter attempted to get closer but was stopped by armed guards with German submachine guns. They spoke Spanish with thick German accents and made it clear outsiders weren't welcome. But it didn't stop there. The AI also analyzed radio surveillance logs from CIA listening stations in Panama. From 1947 to 1962, analysts intercepted encrypted German-language transmissions coming from Argentine Patagonia. These weren't random chatter. They were structured communications, some using WWII cipher patterns. One decoded message from 1953 read, "The old Eagle demands increased funding for northern operations. The doctor agrees if new equipment is delivered." In Nazi circles, Eagle was the code name for one man only, Adolf Hitler. Why wasn't this followed up? Officially, the FBI and CIA concluded there wasn't enough credible evidence, but unofficially, some believe these investigations were intentionally buried. After all, the post-war world was rebuilding. Peace was the priority, not chasing ghosts of the past. Still, the reports kept coming. Another sighting placed Don Adolfo in Paraguay, where he was said to travel in a black limousine, escorted by German bodyguards. One witness described a man in his 60s who waved with his right hand in a very specific, rigid motion, like a salute. He lived in a heavily fortified compound, received packages from Europe, and listened to German broadcasts on shortwave radio. Others claimed he was seen walking with a cane, surrounded by young German men in military posture, in a secluded village known for its strange silence and strict access controls. Even more unsettling were reports from Argentina's port authorities. In July and August of 1945, months after the war in Europe ended, two German submarines, U-530 and U-977, suddenly surrendered in Mar del Plata. They had no reason to be there. The Atlantic crossing takes weeks, not months, and both submarines were found with nearly empty fuel tanks, even though they should have had reserves. Witnesses at the port claimed that heavy crates were unloaded before the surrender, their contents unknown. The submarine crews were interrogated by U.S. intelligence, but those interrogation reports still classified. Several of those crew members remained in Argentina, received citizenship, and vanished from public record. One document simply notes they were granted legal status for services rendered. Taken alone, each clue might seem circumstantial, but together sightings, encrypted messages, unexplained submarines, guarded compounds, a pattern begins to emerge. A pattern the AI couldn't ignore. It's the outline of a man not running but relocating. A man with help, with protection, with power, and above all, with a plan. That man may have been Adolf Hitler. If Hitler escaped, he didn't do it alone. The AI identified one organization as central to the escape. Odessa, short for Organisation der Emiligen SS Harrigan, or Organization of Former SS Members. Officially, it was a post-war group formed to protect former Nazis from prosecution. In reality, it was an international escape network with vast resources, secret routes, and powerful backers. This wasn't fringe conspiracy. It's historical fact. Odessa funneled thousands of high-ranking Nazis out of Europe. Their escape routes, known as the Ratlins, were well organized and deeply embedded in the post-war infrastructure of Europe. The main corridor ran through Italy, where Nazi fugitives were sheltered in Catholic monasteries, then smuggled to the port of Genoa and shipped to Argentina, Brazil, and Paraguay. One man in particular stood out, Monsignor Krunoslav Draganovic, a Croatian priest based in Rome. He personally orchestrated the escape of over 1,000 Nazi war criminals, including some of the worst butchers of the Holocaust. For every escapee he received between $1,500 and $3,000, a fortune at the time. But where did all this money come from? The AI traced financial trails leading straight to Swiss banks, which held enormous sums under the guise of refugee aid. But those funds were, in fact, linked to Operation Bernhard, a Nazi counterfeiting operation that flooded Europe with forged British pounds and US dollars. By war's end, the Nazis had printed what would be worth $15 billion today. A significant chunk of that money was moved through Vatican channels into secret accounts and hidden vaults, not to help war refugees, but to build an underground empire. The Vatican's involvement, while shocking, has been corroborated by historians. Cardinal Giovanni Montini, who later became Pope Paul VI, was implicated in facilitating financial support for select Nazi fugitives. The goal: prevent the rise of communism by quietly supporting anti-Soviet assets, even if those assets were literal war criminals. Among the beneficiaries was Adolf Eichmann, the architect of the Holocaust. He lived comfortably in Buenos Aires for 15 years, under the alias Ricardo Clement, working at a Mercedes-Benz plant, raising a family, and attending German club meetings. Mossad finally captured him in 1960, not because of international intelligence, but thanks to a teenage girl whose father was a Nazi and who had fallen in love with a Jewish boy. Even more chilling was Joseph Mengele, the Angel of Death. From Auschwitz, he fled to Brazil, where he lived under various aliases until his death in 1979. He had a home, a medical practice, and steady financial support. Despite being one of the most infamous war criminals in history, these men didn't just vanish, they were protected. If Odessa could do that for Eichmann and Mengele, imagine what it could do for Hitler, if Hitler survived and escaped. The next question is, what did he do with his freedom? The AI's findings suggest he didn't simply go into hiding. He went into rebuilding. The clues point not just to survival, but to strategy. Welcome to the chilling theory of the Fourth Reich. After 1945, the world believed Nazism had been crushed, but in the shadows of South America, a different war was unfolding, one not fought with tanks and planes, but with money, secrecy, and long-term vision. Hitler's most loyal operatives didn't just disappear. They resurfaced in Argentina, Chile, and Paraguay. Dozens of German enclaves were established, fortified ranches, gated communities, settlements that operated like microstates. Locals whispered of strange rules, secret meetings, and foreign visitors arriving in the dead of night. In Bariloche, Argentina, a massive German-style mansion became known as La Casa del Alemán, the German's house. Workers were forbidden to ask about the reclusive pale man with a limp and a damaged hand, who read European newspapers and listened to German radio late at night. He paced the terrace in silence, often waving his hands like a man practicing a speech. He was called only one thing: Herwolf, Hitler's personal nickname. More settlements appeared in Nueva Germania, Paraguay, Santa Catalina, Brazil, and Colonia Dignidad, Chile. German colonies operated under their own laws. In Colonia Dignidad, residents were forced to wear uniforms. Children were separated from parents, and a strict Nazi-style discipline ruled. A private runway, radio station, and underground rooms were discovered years later. But the strangest thing, these places weren't hiding. They were building. They had modern infrastructure, medical labs, encrypted radio communications, and direct supply lines from Europe. According to the AI's synthesis of eyewitness reports, intercepted communications, and financial trails, these settlements weren't just refuges, they were forward bases. The network had a purpose. Not to create a new Nazi Germany on a map, but to infiltrate the world from within. This was the Fourth Reich. Documents suggest this underground empire had four main objectives: financial power, using Nazi gold and Swiss bank accounts to fund operations; ideological indoctrination, keeping National Socialism alive through underground propaganda; scientific advancement, continuing Nazi research in secret laboratories; global infiltration, placing operatives into politics, corporations, and intelligence agencies. This wasn't fantasy. Klaus Barbie, the Butcher of Lyon, became an advisor to Bolivia's government and helped organize a coup. He had military protection, diplomatic immunity, and access to millions in offshore funds. Other Nazis held positions in business, banking, and arms trading. Their names vanished, but their influence grew. Companies flourished. Fortunes multiplied. Ideologies quietly spread. Why did no one stop it? Because many Western powers, especially the US, turned a blind eye. The Cold War was heating up. Anti-communism was the new priority. And these Nazis, they were anti-communists with intelligence, networks, technological expertise, and massive resources. To some, they weren't war criminals. They were assets. The AI concluded that this underground empire operated well into the 1970s, funded by Nazi wealth, protected by governments, and focused on one singular goal: returning Nazi ideology to power. Slowly and silently, what if Hitler didn't just survive? What if he succeeded in building his empire, not through open war, but through hidden conquest? One of the most disturbing discoveries from the AI's analysis wasn't just about fugitives or finances. It was about science. Hitler didn't just flee with gold, he fled with minds. According to US military intelligence, at the end of World War II, more than 3,000 German scientists and engineers simply vanished. Physicists, chemists, biologists, rocket experts, gone without a trace. Some were taken in by Operation Paperclip, a secret US program to recruit Nazi scientists. Werner von Braun, who helped develop the V-2 rocket for Hitler, would later become a pioneer of NASA's Apollo missions. But the numbers don't add up. The AI flagged a discrepancy. At least 1,500 scientists remain unaccounted for. Where did they go? The answer may lie deep in the jungles of South America. In the 1970s, Brazilian authorities discovered a hidden laboratory in the Amazon rainforest. It contained 1940 Sierra German equipment, radiation-contaminated soil, and documents, referencing biological advancement for long-term objectives. The team returned weeks later and found the facility completely dismantled, as if someone had known they were coming. But this wasn't isolated. Similar sites were found in Argentina, Paraguay, and Chile. Underground bunkers, abandoned testing chambers, equipment designed for genetic research, radioactive experimentation, and chemical weapons development. Some labs had been hastily evacuated. Others were buried under vegetation, camouflaged or sealed from the inside. One fragment from an Argentine police file mentioned Project Valkyrie II, and a directive to continue the work for the fatherland in exile. Was the Fourth Reich trying to build superweapons? The AI concluded that these facilities weren't just relics, they were operational for decades. And what they were developing may have been far more dangerous than anything the world had seen before. Testimonies collected from locals near these labs spoke of strange illnesses, animal mutations, and foreign men in white coats speaking German. One report described a convoy of trucks transporting lead-lined crates into a jungle facility, protected by armed guards and barbed wire. And then there's the connection to Antarctica. In 1938, Nazi Germany launched an expedition to New Swabia, a region in Antarctica. They established research outposts, their exact purpose still debated. After the war, those bases were never located by the Allies. Then in 1946, the United States sent Operation High Jump, a massive military expedition to Antarctica, led by Admiral Richard Byrd. It was said to be for scientific research, but Byrd brought with him 4,000 troops, submarines, aircraft carriers, and advanced weaponry. Within 2 months, the operation was abruptly ended. No official explanation was ever given. In a later interview, Admiral Byrd spoke cryptically of enemy aircraft capable of flying from pole to pole with incredible speed. The AI flagged this anomaly too. What was the US military really looking for in Antarctica? And more importantly, what did they find? If the Fourth Reich inherited Nazi science, it's possible they weren't just hiding. They were preparing for a future where war would not be won on battlefields, but in laboratories. By the 1960s, the Fourth Reich was beginning to unravel. The AI detected a sharp decline in reported sightings, intercepted messages, and activity linked to Nazi settlements. Something had shifted. The once carefully guarded network was collapsing from within. The turning point came in 1960. When Mossad agents captured Adolf Eichmann in Buenos Aires. That single event shattered the illusion of safety. The Nazi underground had believed South America to be beyond reach, but Israel proved otherwise. The world had changed, and hiding in the jungle was no longer enough, and the hunt didn't stop. Throughout the 1960s and 70s, Nazi hunters like Simon Wiesenthal intensified global efforts. Wiesenthal received hundreds of tips, some so specific and accurate. The AI flagged them as likely sourced from within the Odessa network itself. That meant insiders were turning. Trust was breaking. One by one, key figures vanished. In 1962, Eichmann was tried and executed. In 1967, war criminal Herbert Kappler was shot during an attempted prison escape. In 1971, Gestapo chief Heinrich Müller was found dead under suspicious circumstances in South America. Edward Roschmann, the butcher of Riga, was arrested. In 1973, Friedrich Schwend, the architect of Nazi financing, disappeared in 1975. But most alarming were the silent disappearances, not of Nazis, but of witnesses. In just 5 years, at least 7 people who had claimed to see Hitler died in strange and unexplained ways. A journalist who published an article titled "The German in the Mountains Died in a Car Crash." A hotel maid who claimed to have seen Hitler's face collapse from a heart attack at age 30. A mountain guide drowned. Despite being a trained swimmer, coincidences or cover-ups, the AI found strong correlations between these leaked sightings and their suspicious deaths. The pattern suggested a shift in the Fourth Reich's focus from expansion to containment. The dream was over. The cleanup had begun. Internal betrayal, external pressure, financial drain, technological obsolescence, a world no longer tolerating shadows. By the late 1970s, the Nazi network was no longer a rising empire. It was a crumbling relic, and Hitler, if he was still alive, would have watched his vision collapse, piece by piece.